All right, welcome back. This is segment 2 in our series, Why the Warmth of Collectivism is a Lie. Last time we dealt with the idea biblically, why Jesus isn't a socialist, and why warmth sounds nice but tends to hide the real mechanism, compulsion. Today, we're doing something different. Today is history. And I'm telling you up front, this one is heavy, but it matters because we can't evaluate ideas only by how they sound. We've got to look at what they do when they actually get power. So the episode title is simple. Who was Pol Pot? If that name is unfamiliar, you're not alone. A lot of people know Hitler, more people know Stalin, many know Mao. But Pol Pot is one of the clearest examples of what happens when the utopian dream of collectivism stops being theory and starts being policy. And I'm not saying modern people are Pol Pot. That's not the claim. I'm saying the logic, the pattern, is worth studying because the same promises keep getting recycled. Here's the thing about collectivism. It almost never introduces itself as control. It introduces itself as care. It says, people are hurting. Systems are unfair. Some people have too much. Others don't have enough. And if we'll just commit to the collective mission, we can finally create warmth. Warmth, safety, equality, dignity, belonging. And if you're a normal human being with any kind of heart, you feel the pull. Because a cold world is real. People suffer. People get crushed, people get exploited. So the question isn't, do we care? Because we do. The real question is, what happens when care becomes the justification for coercion? Because this is where we bring back that concept we talked about last time, toxic empathy. Toxic empathy is when compassion gets weaponized. It doesn't just invite you to help, it pressures you to agree, it pressures you to affirm, it pressures you to support this solution, or you get labeled cold. So instead of asking, is this true? You start asking, will people think I'm cruel if I disagree? And once you govern people by guilt, you can sell almost anything as warmth. So, Pol Pot. Pol Pot was the leader of the Khmer Rouge, a radical communist movement that took control of Cambodia in the mid-1970s. He ruled from 1975 to 79. And what he wanted, this is important, wasn't just a few reforms. He wanted to remake Cambodia from the ground up into a classless society, a kind of perfect society. And if you've listened to anything in this series, that should already set off alarms. Because utopianism, this belief that we can engineer the perfect society, always has a problem. Real humans keep getting in the way. So the solution becomes, we'll reshape humans too. One of the ways the Khmer Rouge framed what they were doing was the idea of year zero. Meaning, everything that came before us is corrupt. Tradition is corrupt. Institutions are corrupt. Old loyalties are corrupt. Old beliefs are corrupt. Even old economics are corrupt. So we're going to reset the nation back to zero and rebuild it the right way. Now, that kind of idea sounds bold, revolutionary, clean, like hitting the reset button. But in real life, year zero means this. Erase what makes people independent. Because if the state or the party wants total control, it has to remove rival sources of authority and rival sources of provision. So historically, under the Khmer Rouge, you see things like markets dismantled, private property confiscated, currency and normal commerce disrupted or abolished, people relocated, work assigned, society reorganized around forced labor and collectivized production. And I want you to hear what that implies. If you don't control your property, you can't provide for yourself. If you don't control your work, you can't choose your path. If you don't control movement, you can't escape. If you don't control speech, you can't resist. And if you don't control belief, you can't dissent. That's not warmth. That's dependency at scale. So what did this collective mission look like on the ground? It looked like people being moved and managed. It looked like forced labor, deprivation, starvation, prisons. It looked like interrogation and torture. It looked like execution. And again, this is not a history nerd moment. This is the point of the entire series. When collectivism becomes enforceable, it doesn't just ask people to be generous, it requires people to comply. Because centralized plans don't tolerate local freedom. If your plan depends on everyone doing what the planner says, then the person who refuses isn't just different, they're a threat. And once the mission becomes sacred, threatening the mission becomes unforgivable. Here's another pattern you'll see over and over in collectivist revolutions. They always need enemies. Because when you promise utopia and it doesn't show up, you have two options. Option 1, admit your plan is flawed. Option 2, blame people for resisting the plan. Guess which option power usually picks? So you start identifying groups as obstacles. You got your intellectuals, your professionals, people connected to the old society, your religious minorities, your ethnic minorities, anyone labeled bourgeois or counter-revolutionary. And I'm going to say this bluntly. Once you turn your political mission into a moral religion, you create heretics. And once you have heretics, you justify punishment. That is the road from we care to we control to we eliminate. This is why toxic empathy matters at scale, because it sets the moral mood. If you oppose us, you're not just wrong, you're cruel. And that kind of moral framing makes coercion feel righteous. So what was the outcome? Historians estimate that millions died under the Khmer Rouge in just a few years, through execution, starvation, forced labor, and disease. And this is where the phrase killing fields comes from. Again, this wasn't theory, this wasn't an academic debate, it wasn't even a thought experiment. This was bread taken away, families separated, people worked to death, and bodies buried. A country traumatized. So when we hear modern rhetoric that romanticizes collectivism as warmth, we need to slow down and ask, what kind of warmth requires erasing freedom? Because if warmth only works when the collective can enforce the outcome, it's not warmth, it's a furnace. Let me bring it back to earth. This episode isn't saying every policy that helps the poor is Pol Pot. That's lazy. And it's not true. This episode is saying when a worldview treats the collective mission as ultimate, and treats the individual as expendable, and treats coercion as compassion, history shows where that road tends to go when the power gets strong enough. And that's why Christians should be very careful with emotional political language. Because compassion is good, but compassion can be manipulated. And when compassion is manipulated, you can get good-hearted people to support destructive things, simply because the alternative is being labeled cold. So the move for Christians is to keep our hearts warm and our minds sharp. We want real mercy, real justice, and real generosity. But we refuse the lie that the only way to get those things is to centralize power, enforce compliance, and treat dissent as moral evil. Because love without truth isn't love, and warmth that requires compulsion isn't warmth. Next episode, we're going to another name that most people do recognize, Joseph Stalin. And we're going to talk about how collectivism doesn't just reshape economics, it reshapes reality. It rewrites truth, and it creates enemies. And it justifies horrifying things in the name of the greater good. All right, before we go, let's close the way we always try to close at It Makes Sense. If this episode helps you, would you do a few quick things? Follow or subscribe wherever you listen. Leave a review. It genuinely helps people find the show. And please share this episode with someone who's hearing these ideas and trying to sort it out. We'll have all the links and resources in the show notes. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Next time it's Stalin. And until then, stay rooted in the Word, stay clear-minded, and we'll see you in the next episode. God bless.